highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it. I think that's a great way to approach living out a dream. It's good to have a dream. It's good to have a goal. It's good to have a vision for your life. It's very good to pursue it. But it's not those things or the fulfillment of those things which ultimately define us.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today is the final installment of our series on dreaming with our host, Adam Russell. This episode of the Ferment podcast is brought to you by Hardin Coffee, a small batch custom roaster located in the rolling green hills of Kentucky. At Hardin, we believe in locating world-class coffee from around the globe and delivering it to your door fresh and roasted to perfection. We specialize in single-origin coffees as well as seasonal blends. Coffee is communal, coffee is culinary, coffee is art. Visit us today at hardincoffee.com.
Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. I wanted to take a minute to invite you to our upcoming Worship Leaders Retreat in Cannon Beach, Oregon, February 19th through the 22nd. This retreat is for anyone who is involved in worship ministry. Join us for a time of rest and encouragement with extended times of worship and personal ministry on the beautiful Oregon coast. If you've never been to one of our retreats, use the promo code FERMENT and get 30% off your registration. For more information, visit our website at vineyardworship.com/events. Hope to see you there.
Hey, what up, everybody? My name is Adam Russell, and you are listening to the Ferment podcast. And this is part 4 in our mini-series on dreaming. Here's what we've been doing. We've been on this tiny little journey together, excavating what it means to be a dreamer and to take a few steps in living out our dreams. And here's what I want to do in this episode. I just want to say some random things. Honestly, there's so much more we could do. This could be like a 10-part series. This could be something we do for a semester. This could be a really big deal. And the truth is, we'd probably need smarter people than me speaking into it. But in light of that, I want to just sort of condense some of the things that have been unsaid up to this point. And I want to distill that maybe into a few things that maybe we need to know along the way. And so I have 5 random notes for being a dreamer. So if you're the note-taking type, if you're the sort of person who likes to make an outline, you can just get some paper or get out your iPad and number it 1 through 5, because that's what we're going to do. And we'll jump right on in. Number 1, if you're going to be on the path of dreaming, you need to know that dreaming opens the door to joy and fulfillment. It opens the door to happiness and flourishing. And it also opens the door to pain, to disappointment, and to failure. You know, I wish this weren't the case, but it just is. And if I'm going to be an honest person, if I'm going to be an honest leader or an honest pastor, I have to tell you that. And here's why. Because being a dreamer it's really being a risk taker. Being a dreamer means really high highs and it means really low lows. That's what happens when you're a risk taker. Here's one of the things I found out in life, especially as I've approached some of my own dreams. I found that everybody wants joy and nobody wants pain. But it seems that a heart or a life that is open to one is vulnerable to the other. Meaning that if you are open to joy, then you're simultaneously vulnerable to pain. If you're open to fulfillment, you are vulnerable to disappointment. They just go hand in hand. Here's why. Nothing's guaranteed. And sometimes in life, things just don't work out. And if you go for a dream, you need to know that you're doing a dance with disappointment as well. Nothing's guaranteed. And if it were, here's the other thing I've found. If it were guaranteed, it wouldn't even be fun. You know, video games with the cheat codes all plugged in, those are only fun for a minute. The exhilarating thing, in all of life is risking. That's the thing that brings us that spark, you know? That's the thing that makes us come alive when we know that we're doing something that might not work out. Dreaming and disappointment, they just go hand in hand. Joy and sadness, they're almost always walking together. And here's what that means. It means that you could have a great dream and you could do all the research and you could work really hard and it might not take off. It just might not work. And there's a lot of reasons why it might not work, you know? It could be any number of things, and we really don't even have time to get into that today. But the thing you need to know is that to be open to certain things is to be vulnerable to others. It sort of reminds me of a quote I saw on Twitter a couple days ago. One of my friends tweeted this. It's a quote by a guy named John Ruskin. I have no idea who he is. I did a little research on the Google and just saw that he's a guy who lived like 100 years ago. Anyway, John Ruskin said something I think is really true and it's applicable to this. He said this. He said, the highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it. I think that's a great way to approach living out a dream. I'll say that again. The highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it. You know, it's good to have a dream. It's good to have a goal. It's good to have a vision for your life. It's very good to pursue it. But it's not those things or the fulfillment of those things which ultimately define us. Ultimately, what defines us is who we are in God and then who we become along the way. Sometimes the best thing that will come out of our endeavors will be failure and having our character shaped by trying and risking. Okay, number 2. Having a dream is really cool, but the real question that comes after that is, well, when do you jump? When do you pursue it? I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that having something in our hearts is not the same thing as having a green light to move ahead full force. You know, just because you can conceive of something, it doesn't mean that it's the time to jump out of the boat that you're currently in. Timing is such a huge part of the discerning process. You know, if you're working a demanding job and your spouse is getting a second degree and all of your kids are playing travel soccer, it might not be the time to start a life-altering thing. Or maybe it is. Maybe in the midst of all of that swirl, it's the perfect time to start a life-altering thing. But maybe it's not. And so I'm just trying to interject this idea here that having a dream is really good, but that's not the end of the discerning process. Timing is so important. There's a time for all this stuff. Here's the other thing I'd like to say about timing. It's almost never the perfect time. You know, it's almost never the moment when everything in our life is perfectly still. But I do believe there's a decent moment to do what's in our hearts, you know? Some of us are looking for the perfect moment. That perfect moment may never come. I've sort of like altered my discerning process on life-altering changes away from what is perfect to what is decent, right? What is this a decent time to start something new? You know, I think there's definitely red lights, definitely times to not do things. And so what I'm looking for, rather than on the other side, perfect opportunities, because as you get older, your life accumulates a certain infrastructure that needs to be maintained, you know, responsibilities at work or with family. And so I'm looking less for what is a perfect moment, and I'm looking more for, is this a bad moment? And if it's not a bad moment, is this a decent moment? Yeah, maybe what we need in these kinds of questions is we need to reach out to some friends to help us process what we're thinking about. Or maybe we need somebody who's really good at seeing us why we want to do something. Why? That's a really big question. Not just having it in our heads and hearts, but why is it there? Like maybe it's time to stretch out and risk again. Or maybe it's just the echoes of some soul pain or some soul trauma or some competition that's coming from some other part of my life. I'll just let you know something about my own life. A little self-confessional moment here. It took me about 20 years to figure out that every 5 years, I want to burn everything down and start over. Used to drive my wife absolutely crazy. Every 5 years, I just get real antsy. I get real restless in my heart, and I just want to burn everything up and start over. And oftentimes, this little pattern in my life, it would happen when things are really, really good. And so that'd be real confounding to Heather, my wife. And took me a moment of some soul reflection and some talking with friends to see that sometimes I was feeling like it was time to act on something. Like I would have a dream in my heart and I was feeling like this was a time to act, when in reality, it's just this program that for whatever reason runs in me every 5 years. I'm 40 years old now, and I'm just now getting a picture of not only I have that pattern, but why I have that pattern. And by the way, I'm learning that I don't have to start over every 5 years, I'm also learning this, very connected. I'm learning that if I want to see some of the stuff that's in my heart to grow up and become mature, it would be bad for me to burn it up and start over every 5 years. Timing. That's a big deal. And you know what? You probably can't figure that out alone. All right. Number three. Nobody owns a dream or an idea. No one owns a dream or an idea. Now, I know there are things like intellectual property. Intellectual property is real. And I'm not advocating going out and becoming an idea thief. But here's what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is very connected to the previous point I made on timing. Chances are, if you are having a thought or if you're having a dream, chances are someone else is too. Like, for instance, how many Christians in the last 30 years have wanted to own a coffee shop? Can I tell you the answer to that question? The answer is all of them. All of them. So having a dream is not ownership. The closest thing to ownership is action. Action is the closest thing to ownership. And the truth is, action is still not ownership, because we don't control people. But action is the closest thing there is. And action is taking ownership, not of someone else's life, but it's taking ownership of my life and my dream. And it's not even telling other people that they can or can't do something. So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you have a dream, and even if you talk about it, there's a chance that someone else might beat you to it. And if they do, it's cool. It's actually great. I've actually found it's much healthier to hold these things loosely. Getting all of our identity from our dreams or pursuits is a really fatiguing way to live. Who we are has to be rooted in who God says we are and how we interact with the grace of God and the affections of Jesus. So what am I saying? I'm saying have a dream, and I'm saying act on it or hold it loosely. All right. Number 4, approach life as research and development. If you're going to be a dreamer, it'd be much, much healthier to sort of take on a research and development mindset. Kind of what that means is taking on the mindset that, I'm always a student. There's a sense in which I'm always learning, or that things can be shaped, sort of jumping off of our last point about ownership. Sometimes we feel stuff in our hearts really strong. I know I do. I feel things way before I can articulate it. Sometimes we get flushed in our hearts with inspiration, and we just feel the juices pulsing around on the inside, and then we want to name that feeling, right? And so we do name that feeling, and we call it our dream. And it might actually be our dream. But then sometimes when we start working on the dream or we talk about it more, we realize that what we've named it is actually not the dream. Sometimes our ability to feel something far outstrips our ability to name it. This is why articulation is such a gift. And you know what? Most of us are not great at articulating early on. Like, articulation is something we learn and we grow in. We learn it as we become more self-aware. Articulation is something we learn just as we feel the feelings that are on the inside of us, and then we begin to explore them. Just like a child struggles to articulate whatever language that person speaks when they are young kids. It's the same thing when we're beginning to learn the language of dreaming. We'll feel it first. We'll know it, or we'll think we know it. And then when we try to give voice to it, it might be something different. And so it's good to take on the mindset of being a student or a learner or an apprentice, or that our life is simply research and development. Am I a dreamer? Yeah, I'm a dreamer. But I'm also someone who's always researching and developing. Here's what that means. It means I'm open to change. If you're into R&D, you're open to change. Like you have a hypothesis and you're exploring that hypothesis, but you're allowing the process of that exploration to define what it is that you started out to do. I'm open to change. If we're going to be dreamers, we need to be open to change. We need to be open to being flexible, open to discovery, open to morphing. I'm open to letting this thing I'm feeling lead me somewhere. And maybe that's a place I never thought of going when I first started. Again, it's living open-handed. All right, number 5. Last one. Living out a dream will force us to grow as people. Taking action on our dreams and seeing them come to fruition will almost always force us to do a few things. If you're going to take action on the thing that's in your head and heart, well, one thing that's probably going to happen is you're going to have to interact with other people. And those interactions are going to be the soil for growth. The more you interact with people, the more potential growth that there will be in your life. Not only that, but living out a dream will put us in the position of needing to be a student again. Chances are we're dreaming about things that we've seen, that we experience as fulfilling, but at the same time, there's something about that dream that is mysterious, and so we have to be students again. And so we have to grow in some area. We have to allow ourselves to be a student, to be a learner, and to be educated. We'll most likely also have to come face to face with our own failures and unrefined parts, the portions of our character which is still rough. When you go out and try to do something new, chances are the first things that you do in those journeys or in these sorts of endeavors, chances are you'll fail. Very few people are great at hitting a baseball the first time that they get into the batter's box. You do a lot of striking out, lots of failure. And that's the same thing in dreaming as well. But then beyond that, beyond just the lack of muscle memory that exists around a dream, beyond the fact that we'll fail, we'll also have those failures that are sort of exposing the cracks of our own character, those parts of us that are unrefined. If you become a dreamer and if you act on those dreams, chances are our insecurities will surface. Everything that's in you, everything that's in me that's insecure and needy and scared, it'll just bubble up to the surface. Not only that, but our blind spots will be exposed. Our competing nature will emerge. And by competing nature, I don't mean just like the competition that drives people to be better, but I'm talking about the competition that causes us to see other people in a negative light, or to want goodness for ourselves, but failure for someone else. That thing that's very un-Jesus-like. It'll just come to the surface. And here's the truth. All of this is a doorway to our own transformation. It's ultimately why I wanted to call this podcast The Ferment. Fermentation is a great metaphor for change. The juice starts out one way, but because it comes into contact with some other things, namely the yeast, it changes into something completely different. It's related to the first, but it's very different. And here's the thing, people change. You change, I change. And we change for all kinds of reasons. But here's the note from me that's always sobering. We don't always become better people. Life happens to us, and it's an opportunity for growth, but we don't always become better people. But here's the note of hope. We could become better people with the help of the Holy Spirit, and with some humility and some openness and some letting go. We could become like Jesus, just like Paul says in Romans chapter 8. We've been predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son of God. You know, the opportunity for us to become more like Jesus in the dreaming process, it always exists. And that's the thing about dreaming. It's going to inaugurate a season in our life of needing to grow, needing to learn, needing to let go of insecurities, needing to let go of seeing people as competition, needing to expand, needing to be generous and open and humble. All of these things will be inaugurated and initiated. But how? Well, one way is by taking seriously our God-ordained capacity to dream and to hope and create. But know this, if you do it, it's opening us up to the possibility of change. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. So being a dreamer is like jumping into a pool of water that could be a little uncomfortable at the beginning. But here's what I believe. I believe it's worthwhile. I think it's totally worth it. I think the risk is always worth the price we have to pay. All right, friends, here's what I would like. I would like if you gave yourself permission to dream. If you just said, you know, this next season is all about dreaming. And I would love it if we could just pull all of that stuff to the surface. Let our hearts open up and let all of that stuff that's been buried in there, let it come to the surface. I'd love that could happen. And I'd love it if we had the courage to see where it leads us, the courage to follow, the courage to pursue. Okay. Friends, give yourself permission to dream. Let it lead you and allow yourself to be changed. Peace.
Hey everybody, this is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I got a couple quick things for you. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We've got a bunch of exciting shows coming up and we don't want you to miss a thing. So on social media, you can find us on Instagram at the Ferment podcast, and on Twitter, you can find us at FermentCast. Please let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a review on iTunes. All right, see you next time. Peace.